How are y'all? All right, Monday. So we're going to continue, Anthony and I are going to continue on this resilience thought process because we're working with a lot of people right now. We're seeing resilience just absolutely struggling because we're seeing this increased amount of people coming in with burnout. And burnout's an actual diagnosis from the conventional medical community. Essentially, it means that you are completely depleted of the necessary nutrients and things that you need in order for your body to be able to bounce back in a way that you aren't being just dragged under. So we're seeing a lot of burnout. And I think there's some aftermath coming still from what happened with COVID. And I don't even just mean COVID. I mean, people just kind of energetically after being, shut down for so many years and businesses going under and so much. I think there's this aftermath that we're seeing right now too. So Anthony's going to be spending more time, I think, talking about a lot of this than I am today, because we're going to get specifically into nutrients. Now, last week, we talked about food specifically. But Anthony's going to get a little bit more into nutrients, what we're seeing depleted and how people are struggling, especially women, and especially women that are 35 to 55, because we tend to be up against it a little bit more, I think, than any other woman at any other age, because not only are we up against things like perimenopause and menopause, I think a lot of us are also in stages of our lives where that shift in hormone production is really then compounded with other things that are going on with our lives, with children, older parents, work-related things. A lot is going on that kind of culminates all during that kind of 20-year piece of our lives. So, Anthony, I know you want to get into more of this too, but what are some of the most important pieces of the nutritional, nutrient-specific issues that you see with our clients, especially, but the women that are coming to us that are really in that like teetering on burnout or close to burnout stage, where their resilience just isn't activating and they're not able to kind of come back from what they're seeing?
Last week we got into some foods, covered some of the nutrients as well, or what nutrients you get from the various foods that we talked about last week. But I think we're focusing more on the resilience. The definition of resilience is how fast you bounce back from some kind of a physical, emotional, highly charged event. And we focused, or at least I focused more last week, on the adrenal glands, since they produce stress hormones, and the immune system, because the immune system's other job, other than to protect us, is to help us heal. So we talked about some specific foods and why those foods, because they contain specific vitamins and minerals that help support the immune and the adrenal glands. Actually, what we didn't mention was salt, like pink Himalayan salt. I know sometimes you yourself, you can speak to this too. We hear our clients say that they crave salty foods.
Yeah.
So by putting a little pink Himalayan sea salt, Celtic salt, if you use that also supportive of the adrenal glands. So we talked essentially about vitamin A, vitamin D, not necessarily in this order, but just to kind of recap: vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. We talked about vitamin E, vitamin K. I think maybe magnesium we may have covered, or just the electrolytes in general: sodium, potassium, magnesium. But what we didn't talk really much about was herbs, or some botanicals that are very supportive as well. So we can get a lot of these said vitamins and minerals from foods. I also, just to make sure all my bases are covered, I'll take a multivitamin, and I think that's a good idea. As well, to take a multivitamin just in case, if there are any insufficiencies that just a couple of days go by and you don't really eat as great as normal. This way you can just make sure you're still getting all your nutrients, because we talk about it in the book that in addition to being resilient or bouncing back, don't make lightly of vitamins and minerals. Our body, and I can't get an exact number on this, but it's a ridiculously high number. Our body performs, it's either millions or billions of biochemical reactions per second. It's just a ridiculous number. So let's just go with millions. And all of those biochemical reactions are nutrient dependent, just vitamin and mineral dependent. So I think we can all agree, over the years with pollution and pesticides and just farming techniques, the soil is being depleted. I don't remember the exact study, but the nutrient density of even an organic apple today is different than it used to be, 20, 30 years ago. So, considering a multivitamin, just with my education and learning, it just made sense to me to take a multivitamin. But at the least, try and concentrate on diversity of food, so you're getting not only proper vitamins and minerals or sufficient vitamins and minerals, but you're also getting sufficient antioxidants and amino acids and things like that. But some of the herbs that are also very supportive. So the adrenals, and I know you wanted to mention ashwagandha. I think you wanted to talk about ashwagandha or licorice root, or both.
Both, yeah.
Yeah, both. But for adrenals specifically, there's a class of herbs called adaptogens. And what's really awesome about adaptogens is what that means, or how it helps physiology, is if let's say someone is dealing with a very high stress, high emotionally charged event. How the body responds is the adrenal glands produce stress hormones like cortisol, like adrenaline, hence adrenals. And if that person stays in that heightened state of stress, the body's just, because the body wants to survive, it's going to keep producing these stress hormones instead of other hormones that the adrenals produce, like DHEA and aldosterone, things like that. So what adaptogens do is, if someone's overproducing stress hormones, it'll work with your body to help balance out the production. And on the flip side, if someone's been stressed for 10, 20, 30 years, and it's just a daily thing for them, they don't even think that they're stressed just because they live it every day. And the flip side can happen too, where someone's adrenals are underproducing these hormones, and adaptogens will help balance out the production, so they can either help slow down the production or increase the production of certain hormones. And some of those adaptogens are, a really, really popular one is ashwagandha. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, ashwagandha falls in the nightshade family, but when I look at, like, if someone's following AIP, autoimmune paleo, where they're not consuming nightshades, and they're really 100% all in on that. With situations like that, I always look at risk reward. Right? Is the potential risk of consuming a nightshade greater than the reward of consuming that particular nightshade? And in most cases, even if someone's following a really strict AIP protocol, or just not eating nightshades, consuming nightshades, I think that ashwagandha is worth the risk reward, the risk benefit.
Great.
Then ginseng, there's many different kinds of ginseng. Siberian ginseng is an adaptogen, but American ginseng is not an adaptogen. So it has to be Siberian ginseng to fall in the adaptogen category. Then also what falls into adaptogens are medicinal mushrooms, which is a nice transition into the immune system, because medicinal mushrooms like cordyceps and maitake, they are both beneficial for immune system and adaptogens. They help with the immune system. They support a physiological process called complement, which has to do with antibodies. So they're good. And there's many different forms of mushrooms. There's teas for all of these. There's teas. There's mushroom powder. There's capsules. So mushrooms are really helpful as well for supporting the immune system.
And then, of course, I just like to just put this out there. I'm sure everybody watching knows this, but we'd like to throw it out there. None of these things are get out of jail free cards, right? So you don't get to collect 200, you don't get to pass go. You have to also look at what is causing the adrenal challenge or the burnout to start occurring and stop doing those things as well. So taking these herbs and taking these adaptogens and adjusting there can be incredibly helpful. But if you continue to pound your head against the wall and you take a headache medicine or you take a pain medication and the headache comes back, it's because you're still banging your head against the wall, right? Like, you have to adjust what's causing the burnout to appear, because the adaptogens can only help you so far. And if your resources are being taken up by whatever the root cause, whatever the stressors are emotionally, mentally, and physically, and you're not adjusting your lifestyle and you're not adjusting your decisions and your beliefs and what you're choosing to do every day, if that isn't being adjusted, then your body is going to come back at you anyway. So we don't just take these and hope for the best. Like you want to add these in to help the body become more resilient, but you have to adjust what's going on here. Because if your body is stressed out emotionally, mentally, and physically, and then you find yourself leaning on things like sugar and salty foods and fats and processed foods because you're trying to just feel better for the moment, or you're leaning on caffeine, or you're leaning on things that are mind numbing because it makes you feel better for the moment, these things are going to continue to lead you further down the burnout route, right? And you could take adaptogens all day long and it's not going to fix the problem, which is you making choices because you're not adjusting for something that's going on in your life right now. If work is too much, if whatever relationships you're having are not gelling and you're ignoring them, or you're not doing anything about it, you're not taking time for yourself to adjust your body and your thought process and your belief that you're safe, then your body's going to come at you in a different way. So one of the biggest things that we see with people is the depletion of vitamin B, of course, because of stress. So stress, caffeine, alcohol. What else depletes vitamin B? I feel like there's something I'm missing.
Other than caffeine and alcohol.
And stress, obviously.
And stress. That's pretty much my three go-tos also.
So when you start to look at the things that your body needs and it can't necessarily just make on its own, or it's water soluble, like B, except for B12, is water soluble, your body has to continue to replenish that over and over and over all day long. Vitamin C, things like that, we have to continue to replenish. And if your body is now going out of its way to get, or you're doing something that's pushing your body to move those nutrients out of your system faster, then that's a big problem. So you really want to make sure you're starting to look at, what are my choices? Am I focusing on my own specific needs, or am I just buckling down, white knuckling through, pushing on, saying, well, when this happens, then I'll be able to focus on me, or when this happens, I'll be able to focus on me. What the body is saying, well, when you have a heart attack, or when I completely shut you down because of an autoimmune condition, or when I take you out by the knees because your fatigue is so strong that you can't function, then you will pay attention. So the body's going to get you there until you start to really make these choices on your own, right? And we don't want you to have these problems. We don't want you to run into more symptoms, diagnoses, or any other massive issue that gets your attention in that way. The body will do that because it loves you and it's trying to get your attention to make the best choices possible. But if you're continuing to ignore what's going on, so a lot of the questions that you really want to start looking at is, am I living the life that I wanted to live? Am I in a place right now where I'm having a life experience that I'm enjoying? And if the answer is no, you really want to get real with yourself and ask yourself why. What am I ignoring? What am I thinking is just going to be over tomorrow? What am I hoping just goes away on its own? What am I not actively moving towards or making decisions on that are causing me to get into this space of potential burnout and really hurting my resilience. And it may not be something gigantic, like maybe it's not like you have to move to a different country or something, but maybe it is something that's been nagging at you for years. Maybe you don't enjoy your job. Maybe you've been doing it for so long that it's no longer exciting and it no longer allows you to get creative. Maybe there's some shift that needs to happen and you're making choices based on, well, I'm used to this. It's familiar. It feels safe. So I'm just going to stay here. And your body's done with that. It's in a place in your life now, wants to be excited and happy and joyous about things that are going on. Maybe there's a really tough conversation that maybe you need to have with a spouse or a friend or a colleague. Maybe there's just something that you have to have a tough conversation with yourself about where you are in your life and what's going on. What Anthony and I can tell you for certainty is that nutrients can only get you so far. Like replacing the nutrients through a supplement or through in herbs and other things that you're taking can only get you so far. They can be incredibly helpful when they're used properly and correctly, and when you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing. Because I know, Anthony, I know you'll support me on this one. How many times, especially when we had our physical location, were people coming to us with a box of supplements? Yep. Or they give you a list that's so obnoxiously large that it's like pages and pages of stuff that they're taking or they've been taking on and off. And then when you ask them, well, where did you get this, or who subscribed, originally suggested this? It's usually a combination of some practitioner at some point told them, they saw some commercial on Facebook, they read something about it somewhere, and the next thing you know, they're taking some misguided combination of things where some of them are contradicting each other. And some of them are too much of something. I mean, I know I've done that by accident too, where I'm like, oh, I need to take this now for this. And I forgot that I already had some of the nutrients in something else that I was up to. I mean, I don't take thousands of supplements a day.
Or you see a Facebook ad, for like turmeric comes, buy now or whatever the button is. And before you know it, you have that infamous draw of 400 supplements. Half of them are probably expired. And it gets expensive. We're absolutely pro supplements, but within reason.
Yeah.
If we get on the phone and you're taking 50 supplements a day, then something's not right.
No, and especially if that's the only way you know how to function. Yeah. If you can only function by taking on, then there's something else that is still at a root cause, at a lower, deeper core level that is still causing an issue. Right. I mean, there's only a couple, I think I'm going to lean on you for this one. There's only a couple that you really see people taking that kind of an ongoing basis.
Yeah. It depends on the person. It depends on how they're eating. And a big part of this whole thing, I meant to mention before, is your digestion, right? If your digestive system is jacked up, then absorption of these nutrients is going to be a whole nother story. But yeah, it really depends individual, but just general rule of thumb, I think a multivitamin is not going to hurt. And vitamin D, we talked about last week, how challenging it is to get, regardless of how you're eating, to get medicinal amounts of vitamin D in food. There's so much new research coming out about vitamin D and how important it is. It's really interesting, but then from there, it's going to depend on the individual and depend on what they're dealing with. Right.
We're not saying don't research and do your own thing. What we're saying is you really want an overall really effective, knowledgeable view of what am I taking? Why am I taking it? What is my strategy? I shouldn't necessarily have to take all of these things for the rest of my life. And are they helping each other? Are they working with each other? Or maybe are they contradicting each other? Or maybe I'm taking too much of something. Or maybe I'm taking something and it's not enough. It's not medicinal amounts. And I need that for a short period of time to get myself back on track. Or maybe there's some activity or thing that you're participating in that you didn't even realize, thought process, emotions, that is then depleting you further of something that you didn't even realize. Or maybe you've been taking this thing for 5 years and it's no longer serving you, right? So as we continue to age, as we continue to get older, as our lives continue to change every single moment, some things may shift in a way that something that may have served you to some point, whether it's nutrients or food or some other activity, working out, things like that, it's no longer serving you where you are in your health trajectory today. So having a check-in on those kinds of things is really important, and having a check-in from somebody who knows what they're doing, who can see you from a big picture, who can give you a big perspective. Because I know when I was, working before I became a practitioner myself, and I was working with a naturopath and a conventional doctor, and I was trying to figure out how to solve the problem of having autoimmune conditions, celiac disease and then Hashimoto's. Even after a while, I felt like my practitioners weren't even looking at anything big picture. It was kind of like, oh, you have a symptom. Oh, here, take this supplement or take this medication or take this thing. And it was not like a bigger top-down approach. There was no like 30,000 foot view conversation going on anymore. So Anthony and I check in, well, obviously with each other too, because we're both practitioners and we live together and we know lots of things about each other. But we also check in just big picture. What am I doing? What's the strategy? What's the plan for my health? And we do this with our clients too, where there's kind of a check-in point where we say, okay, let's kind of take a step back. Let's see where you are right now. Do you continue to need all these things? And Anthony spends a lot more time with clients on the nutrient side, the nutrition side, the science side, looking at certain labs every now and then and just checking in to say, big picture, where are you? Like Anthony and I both will run labs, a pretty extensive labs that we look at it for each other. Anthony's looking at both of our labs, but really from the perspective of where are we big picture, what's going on? Because, I just turned 50 this year and, Anthony's in his mid 50s, and we start to really look at things are adjusting in ways that they weren't adjusting the same way before. So what are we doing? What's the plan? What's the idea? How are we moving forward? So we highly recommend you do that. And if you feel like that's not happening for you, if you feel like you're working with practitioners who really aren't seeing the bigger picture, or they're not pulling in all of the pieces when it comes to nutrients, it's not just take the supplement, it's what's the purpose, what's the goal, what's the strategy here, what's going on in your life emotionally, mentally, and physically. So we can see the physiology component, but we can also see the emotional stress component and make sure you're getting a big picture approach. And then you can go deeper and look at it individually and get it much more granular. So if you feel like that's not happening for you, or you would like to have that conversation, you can always then put yourself on our calendar. We can have a conversation and see, is this a good fit for us to work together to help you with that piece, right? If it's not, no worries. But if there needs to be a conversation where you have an outside perspective. And even if you're a practitioner yourself, and we have lots of clients who are practitioners, and Anthony and I both teach, and we're faculty in different programs for holistic nutrition and functional medicine, where we also are teaching practitioners how to do this for themselves, or do this at a healthier way for their clients and their patients. But it's really hard to look at your own stuff, right? So even if you're a practitioner, it sometimes is hard to take that outside perspective or opinion. So put yourself on the calendar. We can have a quick conversation. Let's see where it is. Here it is. You can go to nourish123.com/heal. We'll have a 15-20 minute conversation just to really get a sense for where you are, what's going on, and maybe we're the right people to have a conversation with further, to also kind of pull the whole picture together, to discuss the nutrients, to discuss the emotional components, to discuss all of the pieces that are necessary for you to find what we would determine to be on the path for optimal health for you. So Anthony, anything else on that I missed in that whole strategy there?
Nope. Don't think so.
Okay, cool. So pop yourself into our calendar, nourish123.com/heal. We've made a few adjustments with some other things that we have going on too. And we have a newer program right now that is shorter and really gets much deeper with certain things. So we've adjusted some other things too. So if you've talked to us in the past and it wasn't the right fit at the time, there may be some other options that we have right now. So, all right, nourish123.com/heal. You guys have a good rest of your Monday, and we will see you next week to continue with this conversation on resilience and healing or avoiding